In this edition of the Buzz on Business, we talk with Andy Brophy, a senior finance major from Tulsa. Andy is graduating next month and will begin his job with Bank of Oklahoma in July. We thought it would be good to visit with someone who has spent the past 4 years on campus and ask for his advice to future OSU and Spear School of Business students. You know, Andy, there's been a discussion in some sectors about is a higher education worth it? Is a degree worth it, right? Sure. And so there is this debate. Do you think someone should attend college, and if so, why?
Yeah, wow, what an excellent question to start. First, let me say thank you for allowing me to be here. This is such a treat this morning. But yeah, what a hard-hitting question. That has been a topic of discussion. I think it was especially interesting once Harvard announced that they were going to go all online, and the headlines that accompanied that were, and they're going to still charge full tuition. And a lot of people were up in arms about that. And I think there's a curiosity in that. And what that is why would people still be upset that they're still charging full tuition? And there's a certain, the word that comes to my mind is magic about being on a college campus. And you get a lot of integrity in your higher education when you are on campus. At least that's my experience now, having, being a senior, freshman, sophomore year, half of junior year on campus, and then now the latter part of my junior year and senior year, virtual. And I would agree, that I think the value of a higher education is on campus. But I do understand that the world changes and the world moves. And so it will be curious to see, how colleges cater to students that maybe want a la carte options in terms of courses and students that prefer a traditional path to college. I'm reminded of my freshman, sophomore year of all the development that I went through as a young man, reflecting back on my time at OSU. And that happened on campus and not behind a computer screen. And so, if you're asking what college is, what it's not a little bit, I'd have to say, college is a service. And if you want to, pay a college to give you the service of education, then you should. You should weigh that seriously. It's a big cost, it is. But if that's something you feel like you can manage, or your parents can manage, then it's something you want to take seriously. But I totally understand that it may look different in the future. Always keeping in mind, what does that different look like? Different isn't always good. It's not always bad. It's just different. And how does that work for you?
I think one of the big challenges for colleges is to move beyond content delivery.
Yeah.
So some of the things you talked about is really the essence of what a college experience is.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I guess if I had to make a prediction, I think colleges will have to move to an a la carte feature, and I think we're in the information age and you have Generation Z coming to OSU, hopefully. And, there's the information age, you have social media, you have podcasts, you have all sorts of great YouTube videos out there. And so I think students are more equipped, high school students are more equipped now than ever to say, you know what? I like finance. I saw what happened with GameStop and that made me interested. I wasn't dismissive about the GameStop stock pop. And I think I know what I want to do. And with that comes, okay, well, can OSU offer to me just finance courses? Because to be honest with you, I'm not interested in taking an entrepreneurship 101. I want to do finance. And, perhaps OSU adapts in that way to say, hey, get a finance degree in 3 years in this manner. And maybe finding a way to make that cost effective and revenue effective, right? If a doctor calls patients, a doctor calls their customers patients, and a university would call their customers students. And that makes sense, and that's fine. That's our society. But definitely, working with students to say, hey, we want to deliver. We want, to maintain the integrity of our higher education, and we want to help you out because students are the focus. I'm sure you'd agree.
I agree completely. What advice do you have for people when they come here and try to make friends and build connections?
Gosh, that's a good question too. For me, that was hard. And really there's kind of two sides to your question there. At least that's how I take it. And, you have networking, which is a lot of professional connections or, student connections, colleague connections. And then you also have the other side, which is, honest to goodness friends. And for me, I always found that I could do better on the networking side. Being on campus, there's so many tremendous opportunities. You can just go on Hire OSU Grads, I believe, and find these opportunities. Just sign up and you're there. I went to several mocktail events, and for me, resume builders downstairs at Spears here. And those came naturally to me. I wanted to do those things. But they were also very transactional as I'm trying to, make connections and all that, put on my, my best face and shake hands and connect on LinkedIn, of course, and make that happen. But the other side that I think has probably been harder with COVID is finding community, finding friends. That is so much more difficult. And you need that. I think freshman, sophomore year, I was fine to say, hey, I don't really have any deep friendships, but I have a lot of, networking friends and so forth. But that kind of catches up to you, especially in the pandemic when things were kind of stripped down to their studs. And it's like, okay, well, what do I have? Who do I have in my life? What do I have? And that's something that I just think is of tremendous importance. And if there's advice is just in COVID is try harder. There are ways to be social. We of course have the tool of the mask and social distancing. And there's people that want to get together. And so I would just say, try hard, because that's something you can't let go to the wayside, are developing friendships, developing community. And to be honest, I did that. I did let that go to the wayside. And I think that was hard for me, during the pandemic, is I had to look up and say, man, what am I working with here? Who's close to me? And I had great networking relationships, and those have been fruitful in college, but definitely don't ignore that other side of the coin. Get yourself some real honest to goodness friends.
Obviously academics and grades are important because you want to graduate someday.
Yes.
But what other aspects of college life do you think students should make a priority?
Sure. So I was thinking about this on the walk over here, and I was thinking to myself, man, what other aspects are there? And I think what I decided on was, if you go through high school, freshman through senior year of high school, you can pretty much just get your grades and bumble along, A, B, a few C's thrown in there, and you can get yourself into a college, right? And that next stage of your life is set up, and you say, oh, well, I don't really have to worry about the next 4 years. They're not so much a mystery. It's more schooling at a college, and, here I am. College is different, and I think you have to understand that this is, of course, saving grad school, but this is kind of the final frontier in terms of education and a safety net in life, right? That's that magic of college, is you can go and try things all with a safety net. Maybe that safety net's your parents, maybe that safety net is your school, regardless. So what should you make a priority in your college life is knowing that this is it for you. And maybe that is crass, or maybe that doesn't really line up, but taking it seriously is really what I mean to say. Taking it seriously, to get involved, to find groups, to find community, to use that word again. Grades aren't going to cut it, because you don't have that next 4 years. You don't have another 4 years of college, theoretically, after you. You have the real world. And the real world is not just, can I get a job or not? The real world is, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Do I have family? Do I have friends? It's different than just going from senior in high school to freshman in college. So I think making community a priority, and making connections, of course, is the biggest priority you can have, because when it's all said and done, you'll get your cap and gown, you'll get your handshake, in a non-COVID world, maybe you get a fist bump in a COVID world. And then that's it. The college has performed the service for you. You've earned your degree, and they say, good luck. We'll help you out a little bit here and there, but we turn our attention back to the people on campus. And that's fair, and that's fine. But that means you're out there. You have to go and make your own path. And so you have to be considering in college, preparing your mind, preparing your heart, not just preparing your transcript. So that's what I would say.
What qualities have you looked for in a class or a professor?
Absolutely. So in a class, just a nugget of interest, For me, I took a real estate finance class that I loved. And I don't have the idea necessarily of graduating college and working in real estate, but honestly, I like going to open houses. I like driving down the street and looking at cool homes. And so that little nugget of interest said, okay, let me sign up for real estate finance. That's how I would pick a class. In terms of professor, again, it's a testament to our point on community and connections, is use those. Talk to your junior friend, talk to your senior friend. Did you take this class? Who was the professor? Were they good? Were they not good? Why? And then kind of absorbing all that they say. For me, my favorite professors have always been the ones that understand that at least I think they understand that business students want a real world application. You know, we're not studying engineering. We don't want to maybe know the science of everything directly. We want to see how this applies and where it has applied using real world examples. So for me, that's always been huge. And there's 3 types of learners. You know, there's tactile learners, visual learners, auditory learners. And I think for me, professors that I have had less of a connection with have only catered to that auditory learner. And I'm a visual learner. I'm a tactile learner. I want to use my hands. I want to see things play out. A YouTube video is even helpful. There's no shame, I don't think, for a professor pulling up a YouTube video, you know, or an infographic. That helps me. So I think knowing yourself, knowing your learning styles, asking around your community, your connections, and then holding on to that nugget of interest. I think that was my recipe for picking classes, picking professors that I could get on board with.
Yeah, it reminds me, I really think we've moved from a knowledge economy to a wisdom economy.
Oh, yeah?
Right, because everybody's got a smartphone, you can look things up, right? I mean, you can find information, but
Of course.
can you apply it? Do you know how to discern if it's good data or whatever? And that's really, I think, the challenges for colleges is to catch up with that.
Sure.
You know, we need to emphasize what you said more, is the application of this knowledge and how do you apply it? Where is it relevant? Rather than having people memorize 10, you know, the top 10 things or whatever, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because kids can quickly look up those things, but when do they know when to use information, and that to be better decision makers, really, I think, is what the challenges for colleges going forward is what we need to focus on.
Absolutely. I want the material to come to life in the classroom. That's why I'm there, is make the material come to life, because you're right. I can just go online and find basic information, but bring it to life. Make it animated for me.
Yeah, my youngest son, you know, even his job, he's gone to YouTube videos to learn how to do certain Excel techniques, right? So I mean, the information's out there for free, and so you know we have to move past that.
Absolutely. So absolutely.
Office hours. You know, when I taught, you know, it was a lonely experience. You know, what would you advise students about office hours that faculty have?
Sure. So that's the way the material is going to come to life the best, you know, is office hours. And I think Spears just launched a new series, if I'm not mistaken, called Office Hours, where you go and visit professors for the Instagram account. And I love that. I really do. You know, makes them more personable, because office hours, that brings it to life, right? You know, Dr. McLean, who's in the economics department, of course, Dr. Urich, who's in the management department. Those are professors that I went to their office hours and I talked to them, and you kind of just get to know them, and you realize they're not too bad, not too scary, and they want to offer you a lot of help. You know, Dr. McLean, I recall I went to his office hours, and he's got a whole shelf worth of economics textbooks, and he literally just picked one off and said, "Here you go," and gifted it to me. If it still holds its value in 4 years, I may try and sell it, Dr. McLean, but the sentiment really stuck with me, right? Is he said, you know, here's a textbook, I want to help you. It was a gift. You know, gifts make us feel good. It's a lot of people's first love language. And that to me was a testament to, you know, what Spears professors want to do. They want to help and they want to invest in you. And they're not too scary. Go into their office hours, knock on their door, you know, have a conversation. It's good practice in interpersonal skills at the very least. Even if you don't get the economic knowledge you were looking for, it's an effort in people skills. And I think we could all use that. So, man, go to office hours. And I'm excited for that Instagram series so people can kind of get to know them digitally first, maybe. Maybe that's the recipe Spears needs to make it less of a lonely experience.
You know, Professor Urich and I have talked years ago that pretty much the only students that seem to come to office hours are those that had problems. So, of course, it conditioned us when students showed up, oh, they must have a problem.
Sure.
And so we were always stunned when they just wanted to ask a question or chat, like, oh. You know, so, yeah, I think, and, you know, we always tell students, too, is don't wait to have a problem to go see your faculty. Right?
Totally.
If you've gone to see them and, you know, they get to know you, then when you do have a problem, you know.
Yeah.
It's not that big a deal.
It's not a big deal. Even, man, this is going to be the Dr. McLean Love Fest, but he has a little coffee maker in his office, and he even offered me a cup of coffee, and I obliged. It was excellent. And there we are talking about school and economics, and he helped me with the problem that I did come to him with, or a question that I rather would probably be more poignant way of saying that. But it was just a great experience. You know, these people, they're good people, and I think that's a testament to, you know, we always say we're a cowboy family, and you know, power of personal here at Spears. And I think that's not just cheap sentiment. I think that rings true here.
So obviously one of the goals when kids come to college is kind of figure out who they are and
Totally.
differentiate themselves from their friends, competitors sometimes.
Sure.
What can students do to begin that process as freshmen?
For me, I mixed on-campus involvement with off-campus involvement. I think it was marketed to me, at least as a freshman, that on-campus involvement is a huge breadth of things. You know, you can be in clubs, you can be in fraternities, sororities, you can have jobs on campus. And then it seems like the ad for off-campus involvement was, well, you can get a job and that will also look good. You know, you can go be a server at Texas Roadhouse. But for me, what I want to do and what I would encourage other people to do is look at that off-campus category a little longer. You know, you want to definitely have a good balance of on-campus activities. I was a member of Delta Sigma Pi, which is our business fraternity on campus, and I held a position there, and it was a good time. Learned a lot, met a lot of great people, so definitely recommend that to any Spear students is Delta Sigma Pi. But also off-campus, you know, I didn't have an off-campus job, so I thought, what can I do in my free time? Because you do have a little bit of that. You have some free time. And so for me, it was that podcast that we've kind of offhanded mentioned with Dr. Urich. And that podcast, actually, when I went in to interview with Bank of Oklahoma, that's what they wanted to talk about. They didn't really want to talk about my on-campus involvement. They said, oh, we've never seen anyone come through with their own podcast. And that's not to toot the horn of the podcast. At that point in time, it wasn't even all that successful. There weren't too many streams of that podcast, but it was different. And it showed that I wanted to do something differently. And it was something that I was in terms of leadership, I was the founder, I was the CEO, I was the chief marketing officer, you know, I was all those things, right? And I think that was more impressive to them than just kind of, oh man, is it Pink Floyd that says another brick in the wall?
It is. I'm old enough to remember that. So
yes, you know, and you know, that's fine. There are people that do that and it works out really well for them. But I think it was interesting to them, or it caught their attention, and they wanted to talk about the things I was doing separate from the wall. So my encouragement to students would be, you know, show that you can do it, show that you can, you know, play in bounds, you know, get your grades, do some on-campus things, and also show that you have the capacity for so much more. You know, for me, it just happened to be that podcast. And again, not at that point, not very successful. You know, it wasn't really gaining too much traction, but it was enough to say, hey, I made an effort to go and talk to a professor. I made an effort to, you know, discover how to get things on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I made an effort to, you know, make promotional materials, and that was of interest to them. So to differentiate yourself, I would say, look at what you can do in your free time that's not in the context of clubs or fraternities that would really set you apart. Because they've seen fraternity people, they've seen sorority people, they've seen people in clubs, they've seen all that. What have they not seen? And maybe toe that line.
You know, Andy, that's a really interesting point. I think sometimes students get too caught up in the cookie cutter recipe approach, but you're right. Who would have thought that a podcast would have been it? But there's, you know, things like that give you something to talk about
Absolutely.
in an interview and make you seem a little intriguing, you know, just a little out of the norm. So I think that's great advice, not to discount the value of those types of experiences.
Right, totally. It's been so much, and it was fun. You know, it's something I cared about too, which made me want to pursue it, you know, very intensely. And I did, and I think that was curious to them. And, you know, maybe it's just you started a stock investing club in your hometown or something, right? Just something they haven't seen before, which seems cheesy, but I think could be really effective.
Yeah, I think, you know, leveraging a hobby or an interest or,
Yeah.
you know, anything that makes you a little bit unique.
Absolutely.
Not weird.
Unique.
You know, weird might be okay. It depends how you, and again, I always tell
Sure.
students, it's all on how you sell it and package it.
Oh man, there's so many. I think Dr. Urich taught me once something you taught him was it's all in how you frame certain things. You know, you can brighten up, and maybe you didn't say this part, but I just, you know, to continue with your metaphor is you can make a lousy painting really interesting if you have a really cool frame around it.
You know, I agree. You know, I think way back when I graduated college, you know, I grew up in a farm, so I thought, well, they didn't want to hire that, so I kind of hid that.
Right.
First interview, it came out that I grew up in a farm. Kazing, they forgot about my GPA, didn't care, right? All these great attributes of farm kids. So
Right.
I moved it up into my resume after that. But, you know, I had no idea that would be, but even, you know, that was unique. You know, now I think we're down to like 3% of the population grew up on farms. So,
Yeah.
you know, it without even trying, it made me unique and gave me some things to talk about.
Of course. And I mean, you know, with students in Spears, they want to see soft skills, like those peripheral skills, not just finance skills or marketing skills. And yeah, I mean, growing up on a farm, that I'm sure that showed to him that, the value of hard work. You can get up early in the morning and you can deliver on that. And I'm sure that was a really good conversation, upon that discovery.
But who'd have thunk it, But I think you're right. I mean, don't discount the experiences you've had. It's all in how you package it and you can sell it. And, what'd you get from it? What skills? Like you said, right, all those things you develop, not just the podcast, but how you went about developing it, selling it, packaging. Those
Absolutely.
are really valuable skills.
Yeah, it was a blast to do it because I cared about it, and I cared about it probably more than some of my other on-campus roles, just because it was my baby at one point. You want to care for it.
Absolutely. So even with the past year and a half, what would you say is your biggest highlight of your time here at OSU?
Can I say Cade Cunningham? No, but certainly a big part of it. For me, I love doing so many different things. Attending college basketball games was actually, one of my favorites. Being in Gallagher-Iba and cheering on the Cowboys in basketball was a blast. My freshman year, I saw them beat number 4 OU. They had Trae Young, and we beat him in overtime, and we stormed to the court. And I look back on that memory fondly, and it was just a great time. And even Dr. Yerk's class was a highlight for me, if we want to keep it academic, because he's such a magnetic personality, and him, of course. And so just that, I was fortunate enough to just sit back in his class and listen, and read the books he recommended to me. And college was a growing experience, not just the books he recommended, but I'd read a lot in college, and that was always super interesting. And you can kind of measure up books about human life, because you have a lot of people to then psychoanalyze, but not to detract from the point. It's just fun to kind of soak up things and enjoy the festivities of college basketball and just be on campus and be a part of something. And I'll when it's time for me to bring my family to Oklahoma to Stillwater, I'll be excited to do so and go and eat around Stillwater and bring them to games and show them Theta Pond and all that amazing stuff that OSU has to offer.
Well, let's look at the other side. What was a disappointment, or when you look back, what you would have liked to have done differently?
Yeah, done differently is an interesting question. And if I can be quite honest with you, my freshman and sophomore year, I probably had a harder heart than what I wanted to have. I wasn't, warm towards people. It was about transactions. How can I network best? How can I get my degree best, my grades? And I'll have some fun and laugh with people. And that's nice, but I definitely didn't have, a servant's heart. I didn't have a warm heart. And I think that's something I've discovered in the last 2 years of college. Senior year and junior year is like, for me, I find the purpose in life in loving people and serving people. And that's something I've failed to do my first 2 years of college. And so if I could go back, to freshman year, I would hope to bring, a warmer heart with me, to love people better, to serve people better. And make genuine friendships and build genuine community. And that's something I'm only just now learning to do as a 22-year-old, is make deep, worthwhile relationships and develop a community. And so that's what I would encourage someone to do, is really, take the measure of your heart and see where you can take it, because there's a lot of good you can do with someone, and people need you and people want you, which is huge, something I've only learned recently.
Well, don't be too hard on yourself. I think when you're a freshman, you really are so much focused on yourself, right?
True.
You're out of high school, from your parents. So there really is that, separation of yourself from that identity. But I think it's commendable. You have continued to evolve. And now that you've kind of looked internally, you can now look externally.
Absolutely.
And make connections.
So true, right? I mean, those are some of the biggest things you learn in college is, what's my identity? Is my identity separate from my fraternity? Is my identity separate from being a student? Who am I? What's my role? Who's my community? Where do I find that? I seem to, suffer sometimes. What is the meaning in my suffering? Ask big questions you don't want to ignore by spending every Friday, Saturday night out. Spend time investigating you. Again, kicking the tires on your own life. It's a fun metaphor, but one I think people should really take seriously and with, honest consideration.
Yeah, I tell freshmen all the time, I said, if you leave OSU the same person that entered, we failed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you haven't evolved and grown in whatever way that is, right,
Sure.
Then you've either wasted college or we failed,
right,
to stretch you.
Absolutely.
Well, Andy, tell us what you're going to do after graduation.
Oh, yeah, sure. So graduate in May, I'll get that finance degree, and I'll go to work for Bank of Oklahoma. You spend the first 5 months in their Tulsa office there. That's where they're headquartered. And then I'll move over to Oklahoma City, but not before I get married. I'll get married on May 22nd, which is
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's very exciting. And yeah, a huge transitional period in my life, right? Going from school to work with, a wife will be quite the task. But yeah, so I have graduation and marriage, and all senior year I've been working on a big project. I've been writing a manuscript that I'm looking to publish. And so if you decide to follow me on LinkedIn or decide to keep up with me on social, you'll see me announcing that and fundraising for that. But yeah, and that it'll become a book available on Barnes & Noble eventually. And that's based off of the podcast I do with Dr. Urich, and it'll be called Just Ideas, to pair those two works. And the idea is that Chapter 3 is kind of a philosophical, psychological look at suffering, which derives from one of the episodes in the podcast. And I, of course, quote Dr. Urich, because how could I, not quote, the magnetic personality that is Dr. Andy Urich. And that will all come together to be a book available. And I've been working on that manuscript all year. Been working with a couple authors, and it's been my passion project this senior year. So you'll have to keep up with me online to see how that unfolds this year, okay?
I'll be happy to do that. Well, I'm Lutheran, so we believe life should be suffering. So that's where, so I'm with you. So
Absolutely. Well, then I'll have to be sure and send you a copy. I'll even send you a rough draft. You'll get the pre-access.
All right. Well, Andy, it's been a really delight chatting with you. I've been very interested to hear your story and your evolution, and I wish you the best in the future, but I have a lot of confidence that you'll do just fine.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been an absolute treat this morning.